Hello, everyone. Today, we are back on Tabletop Tavern Tips. It has been months since our last Tabletop Tavern Tips video, and I wanted to get back on the set to talk about some Dungeons & Dragons advice. It's been a while, and today, the real reason I'm here, I'm not gonna lie, guys, the real reason is because I woke up today and I chose violence. I want to talk about some things that Dungeon Masters do in D&D that really irk me. I'm not talking about the standard fare, okay? Taking away player agency, not scheduling properly, stuff like that. I'm talking about things that don't frequently come up in RPG horror stories, that don't frequently come up in videos, maybe even common Dungeon Master habits that just really irk me. So yeah, without further ado, I've got some mildly warm takes for you guys, and I'm excited to share them. Let's get started. Alright, first off, dying on weird hills. And I can already see in your mind's eye, you're thinking, Crispy, what do you mean? You need to be more specific on this. And you're right, I do need to be more specific. So, what do I mean? I mean weird world-building hills, specifically. A lot of time, I'll see Dungeon Masters who get really stubborn when it comes to certain aspects of their homebrew world. Now, don't get me wrong, there are times in your homebrew world and my homebrew world, we have hard rules. You know, in my homebrew world, hobgoblins, they aren't really a thing right now. I haven't developed out their society or culture, and I probably never will. I'm not really interested in adding them into the world that I have, especially since other species that I've created, they've taken the hobgoblin's place, largely. So, yeah, you can't play as a hobgoblin. There are other smaller rules, like, for example, hill dwarves have facial tattoos, or the Ardenian military is mostly comprised of humans, stuff like that. And sometimes, those rules come into conflict with what my players want. However, if the player can give me a good enough explanation, I will usually let it slide. And this is where I think I have a hot take. Because a lot of the time, DMs that I see, especially in RPG horror stories, are extremely stubborn. No aspect of their world is to be broken at any cost, and any player who does deserves to be executed for heresy and crimes against homebrew. But really, the world is fantasy. The world is made up. Its rules are artificial. They are created by you. And sometimes you gotta ask yourself, are these rules really necessary? Will the game be broken forever if you have a hill dwarf that doesn't have facial tattoos? If an elf is a part of the Ardenian military? You know, those two examples that I said earlier. Not really. Like, the Ardenian military, for example, is a faction in my game, and in my whole system rewrite thing, factions give certain bonuses. A player might choose the Ardenian military for those bonuses, and want a different race other than humans, dwarves, and halflings, races that are commonly found within that organization. They might want to choose something different for aesthetic purposes, maybe a tiefling. And honestly, if they can give me a good enough explanation, a backstory that lines up with that background, with that faction, I'm okay with it. I believe you should reward players for thinking through a creative way to bend the rules, thinking through a creative way to add something new to your world, to create something unique. I think that can add a lot to your world building. An example of that would be Masao Takeda from Shadow over Karakonos. Crow's Perch, the player behind that character, he created an entire village that had a unique concept of mythology that wasn't found in my world previously, and that was pretty out of left field for me. However, I've taken that concept and ran with it when further developing that region. I think DMs are really missing a shot here when they're extremely stubborn with their world and unable to be flexible about it in any way. Now, I'm not saying that you need to bend over for every player request. Sometimes players make silly requests that don't fit into your world at all. And I'm not saying that you can't put your foot down certain rules. Like I said, if someone asked me to play an Aarakocra or a Hobgoblin, I definitely say no, and unless they can give me like a really sick backstory that fits into my world and into my lore and really wows me, I'm probably gonna stay saying no until they change their mind or end up leaving the game. Because yeah, no Aarakocra, no Hobgoblins, that's one of my hard rules. And you might have hard rules of your own. However, I encourage myself and I encourage others to sometimes let some of those rules bend, especially if they're not entirely necessary to keeping the world stable, in a sense. Oh boy, here's one that bothers the crap out of me. More hit points does not equal good encounter design. Oh my god. There is an XP to level 3 skit that makes fun of this exact thing, and it validates me so much. Basically what happens is the DM gives the party super overpowered stuff and just goes, hey, I can increase the BBEG's health by like 400. Easy peasy. No problem. That's not good. That's bad. Now, obviously, XP to level 3 was making fun of this, so he agrees with me. Thank God for that. But yeah, this is something I see a lot of DMs do, something that I see a lot of DMs give advice on. Oh, just give the BBEG more health. It'll make it a more challenging encounter. Look, you're not wrong. You should probably buff up the health of your BBEG if you want to survive a high-level party. A lot of my monsters come out of Flee Mortals, Matt Colville's book, and a lot of the time, I need to buff up the health of those creatures to appropriate levels because I'm playing with 5 players, soon to be 6 players. That's a lot of players right there, and they're going to do a lot of damage. And if I want the fights to last more than 2 rounds, reasonably, I need to scale the health based on the party. Since a lot of the time, party composition, the amount of people there, that is going to drastically shift how the encounter is going to go. However, a lot of DMs I see do this as a band-aid fix to bad encounter design. They see that an encounter is boring and they go, oh, I know the solution to this. It's to make the encounter longer. No, it's not. It's really not, dude. You just made it even worse, if anything. Making a boring encounter longer does not make it more interesting in any way. It just makes it more boring, if we're being honest with ourselves. So please, don't do that. If anything, if I see an encounter is a dud, I want to end it earlier. And I know what you're thinking. Crispy, that's giving up. Encounter design does not end with the dice hit the table. You're right. And maybe I could come up with new abilities, maybe I can add some minions and add some layer effects and do all this. But at the end of the day, if an encounter is really particularly bad, if I can tell the players are really not into it, I would rather rip the band-aid off and have the encounter end early so we can get on with some good role-playing and salvage the session in a different way. If I try to salvage the encounter but I don't do it right, I could just make it longer and if anything, make it worse. Worst case scenario resulting in a TPK from bad last-minute additions to an encounter. Look, I'm not saying you need to give up every time an encounter isn't interesting. Sometimes you're going to be able to spice it up. Sometimes you can do it last minute. But make sure that you are certain, or at least pretty sure that you can make it work. And make sure that you do more than just give the boss more health. Again, an encounter that is longer is not an encounter that is interesting. It's just an encounter that takes a while, and that is not a good thing. Sometimes I think it is okay to let a bad encounter just end, to let your party take this W and move on to other aspects of the session. I didn't do this in one of my worst D&D sessions, a session that really got to me as a DM for some reason, even though right after that we had a great one, so that felt great. But it was a fight against a giant slime thing that had a healing mechanic that just made the fight longer, and I really regret that because the party were clearly not having a good time. They were just multi-attacking the slime over and over again because it didn't have any interesting abilities, and I wasn't thinking straight, so I couldn't come up with any. And then after that, the party got into some good roleplay, but the session was almost done by that point. It was forgettable, it was nonsensical, it was not good. And therefore, I should have just let it end earlier, gave that roleplay that I actually enjoyed and the party actually enjoyed more time to shine, but I didn't, and that was a huge mistake. A mistake I see a lot of other Dungeon Masters repeating. Dungeon Masters, just like me. Alright, final one. Taking critique in the most annoying way possible. What do I mean by this? Okay, let me explain. So, your players are often going to be the problem finders, but you as the Dungeon Master, you are often going to be the solution finder. Look, no one knows your game better than you do as the DM. I'm not saying that your players can't offer solutions or recommendations. Of course not. Your players can obviously do that, especially if they're experienced, but oftentimes you're not running with experienced players. A lot of times you're running with people who are brand new or people who haven't Dungeon Mastered before. They're not going to be able to tell you about the intricacies of encounter design and how to make better encounters for your party. They might not know that, but I see a lot of DMs expecting them to know that. A lot of DMs, when they ask for criticism, they also demand solutions. And if the players don't give them solutions, well, then that's not very valid criticism. No, that's not the case. Your players aren't going to know everything, and that's okay. It's their job to tell you what they feel about the session, but oftentimes, as a dungeon master, it's your responsibility to figure out how to fix that. I'm not saying you need to be an encyclopedia of knowledge. Luckily, you have an encyclopedia of knowledge right here in your pocket. You can pull up your phone to look up better encounter design, how to make more engaging roleplay, how to run downtime better, etc., etc., etc. Your players might not know that, and expecting them to know that in order to give you critique is just not a good way to run the game, and not a good way to improve the game either. Yeah, I see this all the time. DMs getting annoyed that their players aren't offering them tons of solutions to the problems that they see, and frankly, I think that's unrealistic as hell a lot of the time. Look, am I saying players can't give solutions? Like I said, no, absolutely not. Players can give recommendations, but that doesn't mean you can't get help. Looking online on DM Academy, on Discord servers that offer advice to DMs, those are great resources to pull in some feedback about what's going on in your game, to get community consensus on what to do next. Maybe not consensus, you're not going to get everyone to agree, but just a batch of advice for you to sift through, pull through, experiment with, and see what makes your game better for your players. Taking critique is a very important part of the DM life. You need to be able to take critique in order to get better. But you gotta be able to take critique in a smart way. And expecting your players to offer you solutions all the time is not exactly a smart way to do it. It's not realistic, and it's a great way for you to ignore valid problems that they're bringing forth just because they don't have in-depth solutions to every single one of them. As a dungeon master, it's your job to find the solutions if your players can't offer them. I know that seems like a lot of pressure, but there's tons of people out there that can help you. And at the end of the day, I mean, being realistic, it's probably going to be like a 20-minute Google search before you find something that could change your DMing life forever. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of times that's happened to me. So yeah, those are a bunch of DM habits that really annoy me and that get on my gears. Stuff we don't talk about a lot on this channel. Some of these might be hot takes to you, some of you might be frothing at the mouth at me, but rest assured, if you're very angry at me, I have great news. The reason I'm recording this video, it's very spontaneous, is because in less than 12 hours, I'm going to be going into surgery! Yay! Editing Crispy will put in the video whether or not it was extremely painful. Great! So if it was extremely painful and you really don't like me, rest assured, I felt it. I felt it a lot. But anyway, guys, yeah, I am going to surgery. Don't worry, I'm okay. This isn't like something that is life-threatening. I am okay, but, you know, uploads might be a little bit less high quality, massive scare quotes coming from me because I'm just not going to have the energy to edit coming out of surgery with all those meds and stuff. You know how it is. But, you know, thank you so much for all of your support. I'm really glad to be back in the chair and doing Tabletop Tavern tips. It's been a while since I've done this series, so yeah, it's really good to be back. If you guys enjoyed the return of TTT, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of our content, you can check out RPG Horror Stories, where we talk about the best, the worst, Dungeons and Dragons. And while you're there in the cards, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down in the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment pet peeves, and maybe one of your own DM pet peeves that might be unique just to you. But in any case, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you all next time. Farewell.